Recording. All right, Tila.
Thank you very much. It is 6:01 on Monday, May 13. I am calling the May 2024 TAB meeting to order. We have a quorum of 3 TAB members at the moment. I know that Trini Willerton was not able to join us this month, but hopefully Jen Oakes will join us soon. But let's go ahead and get started and let people in. And while we're waiting maybe for Jen to join, we can go over the technical rules.
All right, I will be sharing screens. Let me know if you're able to see the slides.
Yep,
Cool.
I see it.
We are pleased to have you join us to strike a balance between meaningful, transparent engagement and online security. The following rules would be applied to this meeting. This meeting has been called to conduct the business of the City of Boulder. Activities that disrupt, delay, or otherwise interfere with the meeting are prohibited. The time for speaking is limited to 3 minutes. No person shall speak except when recognized by myself, and no person shall speak longer than the time allotted. Each person shall register to speak at the meeting using the person's real name. Any person believed to be using a name other than the one they're commonly known by will not be permitted to speak. Please use the raise hand function to be recognized for public comment. If you're on your phone, you will need to press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. No video will be permitted except for city officials, employees, and invited speakers and presenters. All others will participate by voice only. The person presiding at the meeting shall enforce these rules by muting anyone who violates any rules. The Q&A function is enabled. It will be used for individuals to communicate with me. It will be used for technical and online platform-related questions only. If an attendee attempts to use Q&A for any other reasons, the technical host has the right to disable that individual's access to the chat. Only the host and individuals designated by the host will be permitted to share their screen during the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, we will move to consideration and approval of the April 2024 minutes. Does anyone have any revisions, corrections?
I'm not sure how much it matters, but in agenda item 4 under moving to elect you as chair, I believe it was I who made that motion and not yourself. So
I didn't nominate myself.
I moved that you be chair, and I think Mike seconded that. So if we just want to correct that, I'm not sure how important that is.
I appreciate that to avoid appearance of self-dealing. So
excuse me, sorry. I'm looking at item 4B1. I could share this screen. I have chair Duhame nominated by Kitching, seconded by Willerton, accepted. Is that incorrect?
Well, it was the motion below that, motion to elect Duhame as TAB chair and Willerton as vice chair. And then I mean, perhaps that maybe I only moved to nominate her. I'm not sure, but I think
it wasn't my motion.
Yeah, I think it was mine. I think I'm the one who moved to make Tila chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll correct that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that change, is there any other discussion or corrections of the minutes? Not I. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you.
As corrected.
I'll second that. And do we all approve? Hands up, please. All 3 of us. Okay. Thank you very much, Meredith, as usual. Nice job. And unless someone else can see people I cannot see, I still don't see Jen Oakes on here. So we will table item 4 for the moment and see if she appears. And as soon as she does, someone, I don't know, wave your electronic hands wildly so we can swear her in and she can begin to participate as an official member of the board. Great. So already we are at public comment then. Any member of the public wishing to chime in, you can raise your little electronic hand, or I think it's *9 on the phone, just what Veronica taught us. Do we have anyone wishing to speak to TAB this evening?
It looks like we have one raised hand. Lynn, if you could confirm you're able to speak.
Dang, I always wait because I want to be the last word. And I'm
Well,
sitting
you're
here
first and last
waiting.
this time.
Right. Well, so far. Maybe I will provoke something. But I guess what I want to talk about today, it's the same old in a way. But I had my fanny pack somehow fell out of my pannier yesterday or something. I don't know how this could happen. And I was on my way to a cello concert and French pianist up at St. Andrews, and I was in Central Boulder. And when I got up there, I went to my pannier and my fanny pack was gone with my social security card and everything. So, and the concert was starting right then. And I'd been waiting and waiting for this concert. It was so disappointing. So I rushed back to where I'd been at 613 Walnut, where I'm trying to stop a demolition of the little house between two condos. And I thought it fell off when it was kind of warm and I took off my shirt. Wasn't there. Went home. I thought, oh, I never put it in my pannier at home. Wasn't at home. I never go to the front door because I never drive my car. But the policeman had her card there. Someone had turned it in. They didn't ask who and where. So it'll always be a mystery to me, so I can't improve this, but I'm thankful I have it. But in any case, when I was, so I rushed, by then it was just coming to 5 o'clock and I rushed up there to see the very end of the concert, which it had ended when I got there. And the policeman was coming in to the parking lot to give me my fanny pack as I went in, because I'd called them and said, well, I'm going to my concert. That's what matters. And, that was really cool. It was a CU police too. And so I really don't understand. So my point was, when I went there, it took me like 2 or 3 times going through the lights. This is why I don't drive my car, aside from the fact that I got a fat butt and I like to ride my bike. I mean, I need to get some exercise besides, being on the internet all the time, writing letters to you and stuff. So, it was just so frustrating, just waiting through all these stoplights just to get that short place. And it reminds me of the fact that we've got 5 affordable housing food deserts coming up. There's Boulder Junction, that's already there, Diagonal Plaza, 2 in Gun Barrel, and then now another one, Boulder Housing Partners, across from the cemetery at Iris. And then we've got that one out at Arapahoe that is a complete island, and it changes the dynamics of driving around town and the congestion. And I'm sorry I have to go, but yeah. It's just, I know it's beyond your control, and it's just the transportation board, but it really makes your job hard.
Thanks, Lynn. I appreciate that. And I'm glad to hear the system worked for you a little bit this week.
I don't see anyone else with their hand raised.
Neither do I. Going once, going twice. Fantastic. Thank you, members of the public, for tuning in, telling us what you're thinking. Let's move on. Oh, good. This is the CIP update next. Item 6. So new members, and I know Mike has already reached out with some particular interest on this subject, but we are at the part of the stuff that happens every year about the capital improvement program, and Garrett is here to help us understand. This is the first of probably 3 updates specifically on this item. But this is kind of how the sausage gets made on the big projects. So we'll have the first introduction here with Garrett. We'll revisit this topic again, probably next month, and then we may or may not finalize the CIP Well, Garrett's going to tell us, but it may or may not happen in July or August. One of those two is likely when we're going to finish our work on this. So it takes a little bit of remembering where we were last time, because it's just a big topic to get your heads around. Okay, Garrett, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Tila, it warms my heart that you started off by saying, good, it's time to talk about the CIP.
I know, I've learned like the hard way. It's actually really important. It is, no offense,
is.
not the juiciest part of being on this board, but it is very important.
Yes, well, great. Glad to be here this evening. And we've been having a few technical difficulties. I wanted to see, have we been able to promote Karen Steiner to a panelist? I wanted to introduce Karen to you all.
Let me go ahead and do that. She should be able to. All right, Karen, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yes, I was just able to.
Great. So I wanted to introduce Karen to you all. Karen is our new transportation senior financial analyst and is a critical part of helping us to bring together the annual budget and capital improvement program. And she's going to be here making sure that all the financial information that we present is correct with our budget and CIP development practices and standards. And so just wanted her to become familiar with you all as she'll be joining us throughout the CIP development over the course of the next few meetings. So I, for the record, am the Capital Projects Manager for the Transportation and Mobility Department. And I'm also joined by Brian Wiltshire, who is a civil engineering manager on our team, a project manager that's been with the city for 12 years. So hopefully, Brian, you are also in a place that you can speak when it's time for you to come online. So we are here to talk about what the capital improvement program is and how it differs from the annual budget, how it's funded. Then we'll provide an overview of the projects and programs that reside in the capital improvement program, and then what our next steps will be as we go through the process this spring and early summer. So the capital improvement program is how we bring to fruition all the variety of projects and major programs that you see happening around the city. And I relate the capital improvement program to home ownership. So you might think of our annual operating budget, which funds things such as filling potholes and snow response, general street maintenance, and traffic operation. Those are the sorts of things that are covered in your homeowner budget, such as like grocery shopping and sweeping and removing the snow from your own sidewalk and so forth. But when it comes time to do a major replacement, maybe you need to replace the plumbing, or maybe you need to replace the roof, or maybe it's time to do an addition to the home because you need more space. Those are examples of what would be a capital expense. And so when we go beyond routine maintenance of our system to major capital maintenance, or when we want to make an enhancement to our system, it falls to the capital improvement program to cause that to occur. And so we make investments in our system because we have billions of dollars of assets that are existing, and we've got ambitious ideas and visions and goals that we want to carry out and bring to fruition for our community. Projects and programs such as the Core Arterial Network and the Vision Zero Action Plan are all really critical goals that we've got, and the capital improvement program is the primary mechanism by which that will happen. And so we make these investments consistent with the 2019 Transportation Master Plan, where we've categorized them into levels of high, medium, and low. And so the first high is we want to make sure that we are taking care of what we've got. Since we've spent significant dollars over the decades putting in place what we have, we need to make sure that we're taking care of that as a baseline. Then we want to, and also consistently with that, we want to make sure that we're investing in Vision Zero and travel safety, because that's also a paramount goal of our department. Then we want to look at making operational improvements and enhancements of the transit, pedestrian, and bicycle system. We previously would have put the neighborhood speed management into this category. It's called out explicitly in the 2019 TMP, so that's why it's identified here. That program has been put on pause. And then finally, the lowest category is quality of life investments such as noise mitigation. So we're spending the great majority of our time and effort in that high priority as we talk about the capital improvement program. We also have the city's sustainability, equity, and resiliency framework, where we want to make sure that the investments that we're putting into transportation and mobility infrastructure are consistent with the overarching citywide goals that are consistent with the SARE framework. And so we want all of our investments to be safe, healthy, and socially thriving, creating a livable, high livability community. Most of them are going to align with the accessible and connected goal, both as well environmentally sustainable and economically vital. So as we look at introducing new line items within the capital improvement program, we need to demonstrate to our decision makers, our policymakers, as well as our own internal budget staff that these investments are consistent with the SARE framework. So we have a process where each year we ask you to provide comments and feedback on the capital improvement program. We outlined in the memo that was shared with you that this month we'll be talking about and providing an overview of the CIP that was approved for the 24 to 29. And then in June, we'll be coming back to present the draft 25 to 30. And then in August, we'll look to ask for a recommendation that will be carried forward to the planning board and then ultimately city council as part of the 2025 budget process. So the already approved 24 to 29 CIP represents an over $100 million program comprised of almost $17 million in grants. The median total per year over that 6-year time span is about 14.7, and the programs comprise about 8 million of that each year. So how is this made possible? It's primarily made possible through our transportation fund, which is largely funded by the sales tax. We have other sources that go into the transportation fund, such as the Highway Users Trust Fund, also known as the gas tax. There are other miscellaneous funds and fees that we get that flow down from the state and the county to the city, but the great majority is made possible by the sales tax. And we have a pretty long and storied history here at the city of taking our transportation sales tax dollars and pursuing grant opportunities. We'll get to that here in just a moment. And I like to use the expression, we strive to turn our dimes and quarters into dollars by pursuing those grants where we provide that local match and are able to leverage the funding that we do have to obtaining funds to achieve larger projects and programs. I would point out that there are not many communities in the state of Colorado that are fortunate to have a dedicated transportation fund. So we're very fortunate to have one, and it's allowed the city of Boulder to be able to make the strides it has in terms of investing and delivering transportation infrastructure. And as was noted in the memo, there is a change coming at the end of 2029 where 0.15% of the sales tax will be going back to the general fund and away from the transportation fund. And Karen's here to make sure that I don't say anything incorrectly, but it is going to have a big impact on our ability to continue to be able to deliver on projects and programs, and particularly on our ability to be able to pursue grant opportunities. The monumental Safe Streets for All grant that was awarded to the city at the end of 2023 would not have been possible without having these dedicated transportation fund sources. And so as we look to 2030 and beyond, there is some uncertainty about the city's ability to continue to be competitive at pursuing those types of grants, as well as the other types of grants that we've been successful at winning over the years. The other funds that bring transportation investment possible are the Transportation Development Fund, which is largely an excise and sales use tax that is attributed to development activities around the city. And so we take those resources and those revenues and invest them in areas that are related to growth and development. It's a much smaller size or slice of the pie, as you can see from the graphics that were presented. And then the Boulder Junction Fund is similarly a transportation development fund, but it lives within, instead of the overall city boundary, it lives inside the footprint of the Boulder Junction area around 30th and Pearl and Valmont and the railroad. So just to elaborate a bit further on the types of grant opportunities that we have pursued over the years and that we currently have inside of our capital improvement program, the primary source has been through the Denver Regional Council of Governments, which is the Denver metro area transportation planning agency responsible for distributing transportation funds to local agencies like ours. And so that's a competitive process that every 3 to 4 years that we submit project ideas that we think will be competitive, and that we've had a pretty long track record of winning a number of projects within each of those cycles to make projects possible. So examples of recent projects that have been completed that were made possible by the DRCOG Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP funds, would be the 30th and Colorado intersection, the soon to be completed 28th and Colorado intersection, the 30th Street project that is now under construction. Those are all examples of TIP projects. The next category is the Highway Safety Improvement Program, or HSIP. These primarily go to delivering projects that will improve safety for all modes of users. And currently we have a slate of traffic signal and pedestrian crossing treatments that are in the capital improvement program that will make safety improvements to those particular intersections and crossing treatment locations. The next category is the Transportation Alternatives Program, or TAP. And we have TAP funds and the 19th Street project that Lindsay Mers will be highlighting later on in the agenda this evening. And we were also awarded TAP funds to build an extension of the multi-use path along Highway 36 from 4 Mile Canyon Creek up to J Road. So that is an opportunity that we've been successful at. It comes around about every 3 or 4 years. Safe Routes to School is an opportunity that comes around every 1 or 2 years, depending on funding availability through the Colorado Department of Transportation, or CDOT. And recent examples of that are the Mesa and Bear Creek elementary improvements. And we were also awarded funding for the some improvements to Manhattan Middle School along Manhattan to improve non-motorized travel for students as well as family looking to get to and from Manhattan Middle School. So that's a project that will be starting later this year. And then I've already noted the Safe Streets for All, that we're very fortunate to have that as a major project or a major funding source to make a lot of projects in our capital improvement program become possible. Other opportunities that continue to be out there, just because we've won one Safe Streets for All doesn't mean that we're precluded from going out and getting others in the future. So hopefully that's a program opportunity that continues to be available for years to come. There are other and a variety of other federal programs that we continue to explore. Right now, we sort of have our hands full with all the grants and projects that we've recently won. But in the next few years, we'll look to see if we can be as competitive in some of these other grant opportunities as we've been with the Safe Streets for All. So in addition to the sales tax situation that will hit us in 2030, Tila's seen this graphic for a number of years, so she could probably actually recite this one, having seen it. But it's an important reminder that construction cost indexes are outpacing standard consumer price indexes, and that's keeping up with inflation, and the infrastructure construction marketplace continues to be a challenge. And so this is a graphic that depicts the reduction of purchasing power as time goes by. And we see this showing up in a number of our major investment areas, such as pavement and bridges and sidewalks. And here is an example of that. So the increase in pricing went kind of crazy right after COVID, which you can see. This is the Colorado Construction Cost Index, which is a report put out by CDOT. And so the trend line is the green line, but you can see the variability. Last year, the things continued to go up, just not at the rate that they have been going up. So as opposed to 17 to 20% increases in costs, we saw things go up only double digit at 10%. So still pretty significant. So that was a bit about the funding, where it comes from, the grant opportunities that we pursue. And now we'll change our focus to talking about how we spend the money that is in the capital improvement program. So we divvy it up into the multimodal programs and into the multimodal projects. And it's split right now about 50-50 and the 24 to 29. That will likely continue as we look to bring you the 25 to 30 capital improvement program. And so the types of programs that are in the multimodal side of the pie chart are the major maintenance, the major capital maintenance. So these would include the sidewalk repair program, general sidewalk maintenance, multi-use path enhancements, and capital maintenance. So we have been doing some work on the multi-use path system to replace degraded pavement, as well as replace bicycle and pedestrian bridges that are on the multi-use path system. That's made possible by these capital maintenance items. The pavement management program lives under this side of the CIP, which is the most substantial item in the capital improvement program. We also have the major capital reconstruction, which funds bridges. And then we also had some seed funding in the prior year for our core arterial network, which is has largely spun off into their own individual projects as we head into 25 and 30. And then we also have the line item for doing mobility enhancements with the pavement management program, which is something that will be talked about next on the agenda. So a little bit more on the pavement management program. James Smith, our pavement program manager, and Daniel Sheeter, our multimodal lead designer, are here to talk about this next on the agenda. So I don't want to take too much away from them. But what I do want to note is that this is a major part of our assets. When we talk about having billions of dollars of assets that we need to take care of, we are spending a lot of money on taking care of our pavement because there's a lot of money out there in that asset that we need to take care of. So that's all I'll say about that, and they'll provide a much more in-depth overview of this next. Then on the pedestrian programs, these are both enhancements, but primarily maintenance. You might live in a neighborhood where you've seen the sidewalk repair program come in and upgrade degraded sidewalk conditions, as well as make improvements to pedestrian curb ramps at intersections. There's also a miscellaneous program that if a homeowner or a business owner wants to improve the sidewalk in front of their property, the city will partner 50-50 with them on that upgrade. And this funding is because we recognize that walking is a fundamental mode of transportation for residents of the community, and we want to make that possible by closing missing links and making the existing sidewalks safer and better. We are fortunate that, again, by having the transportation fund, we're able to make these investments. Most every city in the state has a code that says sidewalk maintenance is the responsibility of the adjacent landowner, and Boulder is not unique in that way. We're like pretty much every other city in the state. Where we are unique is that we are one of a very, very small number of communities that actually participate with homeowners in making investments to upgrade the sidewalk, as well as having a proactive program that strives to go and bring our sidewalk facilities up to ADA compliance. The multi-use path program is, like I said, focused on taking care of repaving existing paths, as well as replacing pedestrian bridges, as well as making enhancements to the existing multi-use path system. And then we have the bridge asset program that is responsible for taking care of the bridges and structures that are all over our transportation network, whether they're on the multi-use path or on the street system. And when I talk about bridges and minor structures, typically we would think of things like the Broadway Bridge over Boulder Creek, or perhaps Folsom Bridge over Goose Creek, which are much larger structures. And by transportation infrastructure definition, structures are actually anything larger than 4 feet in span. And we have in the category of bridges between 4-foot span to 20-foot span, approximately 275 structures, which is a disproportionate number for a community of our size. The reason for that is that we have 13 creeks and drainage ways that come out of the mountains, and we also have 17 irrigation ditches that flow out of the mountains. And so that means that we have a lot of streets crossing these waterways that we have to have culverts and structures to cross. So a number of those structures are aging and in poor condition. And so we are spending money to try to keep those structures in good condition, because in addition to providing vehicular access, many of these streets are important travel ways for pedestrians and bicyclists and transit users. All right, so that's an overview of the capital maintenance and multimodal enhancement programs. And I'm going to hand it now over to Brian Wiltshire. He's going to talk about some of the key projects that are in the 24 to 29 CIP. An important designation here is that there might be some projects that are currently under construction that you don't see in here. And so Brian will talk about why that's the case. So Brian, are you queued up and ready to go?
I believe so. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much, Garrett. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Wiltshire, and I'm a civil engineering manager within the Transportation Mobility Group, primarily responsible for implementing the CIP projects. I'll be covering the Transportation CIP portion of tonight's presentation. This Transportation CIP project slide that you're seeing is presenting the projects currently in the planning phase. Projects in construction, such as the 28th and Colorado protected intersection and the 30th Street bike lane projects, aren't shown since they've already been funded in prior approved CIP years. The table you're seeing shows the budget amount for each project and in which year the funding will be received. Garrett, next slide. Thank you. This TIP local match, years 22 through 25 and 24 through 27 projects, and the TMP implementation slide discusses the various funding sources, such as TAP, Safe Routes to School, HSIP, also noted on a previous slide, and in which years the local match is being provided for. As we receive funding for these specific projects, the match comes out of the $4 million average yearly allocation and goes into each specific project. For instance, that's why the TIP and TMP funding in 2025 only shows up as $1 million. It's also important to note that the funding shown includes the soft costs, such as planning, design, and staff costs, and then the hard costs, which are the construction and material costs. Garrett, next slide, please. Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to highlight a few key projects, not the entire list, but just the ones of broader interest to the public. The first project is the Baseline Road Phase 2 project. The first phase of the baseline was constructed in 2023, which was the tall curb implementation. This project represents TMP investment categories 1 and 2. Construction of this project is anticipated to begin in 2025. Total funding for the project at $3.9 million, with $3.1 million of that coming from grant funding. Project is part of the core arterial network. The graphic that you're seeing on the slide shows the limits of the project, essentially from 30th Street to Foothills Parkway, as well as the multimodal distributions. So for this project, we're looking at about a split of 20% for pedestrians, bike at 50%, 20% for transit, and 10% for roadway. This funding is the second phase of work on Baseline Road to deliver comprehensive multimodal capital-intensive improvements, including completing the tall curb, protected bike lanes installed during the first phase, with scheduled pavement maintenance in 2023. The now completed first phase of work used city funds to begin installing safety improvements sooner from 28th Street to Foothills Parkway and on Mohawk from Baseline Road to Pawnee Drive. This included repaving and restriping the roadway, new concrete tall curbs to protect the bike lane at strategic locations, new or widened bike lane buffers, new crosswalk and corner islands, shortened pedestrian and bicycle crossing distances, and green bike lane markings. Garrett, next slide, please. Second project is the 30th Street preliminary design from Arapahoe to Iris. This project is looking at the next segment of the 30th Street corridor. Previous improvement projects, 30th and Colorado Underpass, 30th Street bike lane improvements came directly out of the 30th Street and Colorado Avenue corridors study project completed back in 2018. This current project also represents TMP investment priorities 1 and 2. The engagement and design phase will occur in 2024 and 2025, with implementation projected to be 2026 and beyond, using some of the recently awarded Safe Streets for All funding. This project is also part of the Core Arterial Network and a Safe Streets for All corridor. Garrett, next slide, if you would, please. The third project being presented tonight is the Broadway Intersection Improvements Project. The goals of the project are to convert the third lane of Broadway in each direction to a business access transit, also known as a BAT lane, and improve transit at the Broadway Regent and Broadway Table Mesa intersections. This project is also another CAN corridor, or within the CAN corridor, with TMP investment priorities 1 and 2. The design of this project is expected to be completed in 2024 with construction in 2025. City received $4 million in grant funding for the project with a total cost expected to reach $4.6 million. Multimodal distribution for this project includes pedestrians at 10% and transit at 90%. Garrett, next slide. Thank you. Next up is the East Arapahoe Multi-Use Path and Transit Stops project. Goal of this project is to enhance the multi-use paths and connect the missing links to help complete the network. This project represents TMP investment priorities 1 and 2. Construction of this project is anticipated to begin in fall/winter of 24 with the undergrounding of the overhead electric lines, which is currently under construction by Excel, followed immediately by construction of the multi-use path and transit improvements. Total funding for the project comes in at $1.9 million, with $760,000 of that coming from a federal CMAQ grant. Garrett, next slide, please. The last two projects are the downtown Boulder Station and the 14th and Canyon traffic signal replacement projects. The goal of these projects is to improve pedestrian safety, crossing safety and bus operations through the signal improvements and enhance transit through additional bus capacity. Downtown Boulder Station represents TMP investment priorities 1 and 2. Construction of this project is anticipated to begin in 2024 with total funding for the project at $982,000 with $593,000 coming from grants. Funding for the 14th and Canyon improvements is $650,000 with construction expected to start in 2025.
All right. So next steps are we will come back in June and present the draft 25 to 30 CIP. And I wanted to say for the newer tab members, I know this is a lot of information, and it's as Tila noted, it's a lot to absorb in a short time frame. In years past, we have offered to meet with newer members in a smaller meeting if necessary to help facilitate the understanding so that you're feeling as informed as possible and contributing to the development and the recommendation of the CIP. And as Tila noted, I want to come back to that point just here sort of ad hoc to say a number of the projects that we're building right now were approved by TAB members perhaps 5 or 6 years ago. So the work that you're doing now as a part of the CIP 25 to 30 will not be realized until some of you are actually fulfilled your term and have left the board, and it will be another set of board members who are saying, why are we doing these sets of projects? And it will be because you all have said this is what we think is important and where we should be spending our resources. So it's super important that we have you all involved and participating in this effort, and glad to have your attention on this. And then at the August meeting, as I noted, that's where we'll look to get a recommendation from you as we head into the planning board, which will occur also in August. And then September and October is where City Council will review, do a study session, and then approve the 25 budget and the 25 to 30 CIP. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you all might have.
Thank you, Garrett. I'm gonna pause us right here. Jen Oakes has joined us, so I would like to swear her in as a tab member before we proceed with questions from tab members, if that's all right with everybody. Veronica, are you going to be the one to swear her in? Yes.
Yes, I
Okay.
can do so. Let me share my.
Hi, Jen.
screen.
Welcome. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Hello,
All right, Jen, I'm gonna be sharing my screen, and if you could, please read the oath that is displayed. Let's see.
So Jen, it looks like you're talking, but I can't hear you.
Yeah, Veronica, just a second. I don't know that we can hear Jennifer.
Oh, let's see.
I do have a horrible internet.
That's okay. I heard you just now. It's
Yeah,
working.
we can hear you now. Yeah.
We'll go ahead and I, Jennifer Oakes, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America and of the state of Colorado, and the charter and ordinance of the city of Boulder, and faithfully perform the duties of the office of a member of the Transportation Advisory Board, for which I am about to enter.
Terrific. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. And I'm so sorry about my communication errors.
I'm not sure what you're referring to, but you're here with us now, so carry on. Okay, so you saw most of Garrett's presentation, but I think you might not have been here right at the beginning. This will be the first of 3 kind of check-ins. But this is a portion where we have a chance as board members to sort of ask clarifying questions. The staff isn't really necessarily coming to us tonight for any particular feedback, but they're always very gracious in accepting it. But if you have questions about what was presented and what you've heard so far, this is a great time. We'll have the people here, and it generally, if you have a question, probably someone else does as well. So it's a good time to ask questions. Mike, you look unmuted and ready to go. Oh, we can't hear you either. No, still not. So Jen has her hand up. Let's go to Jen, and then we'll see, Mike, if you can sort out what's going on in the meantime.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. I wanted to know if disability accessibility was ever part of the planning process for any of these grants or projects.
Yes, so I can speak to that and say that that is incorporated and integrated to each of the planning efforts, as well as the design and construction projects that are included in the CIP programs, as well as the individual projects. as part of each of these endeavors, it's really important both to us individually and collectively, but also because we know that the city has goals of inclusion, and it's consistent with our SARE framework that we need to be thinking about how to address the needs of people of all ages and abilities as we bring these projects forward. And an example that I've shared, I think, in the past, and I think is a great one, is that we worked with some community connectors on the development of the downtown Boulder station, where we were able to meet with the Center for People with Disabilities on site to understand what the unique challenges and barriers are to a design where we're looking to add additional bus gates. And it was super informative to experience it with the folks that were there on the ground with us, so we could get that type of feedback and incorporate those comments into the design. And so we look to do that on every project as it being an implicit part of the process.
Mike, are we gonna try you again now?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Whoa, there you go.
Took the AirPods out of the equation. I was really impressed to learn all the projects. I wasn't familiar with all of these that are planned. And the biggest question mark that stands out to me is funding with the expiring transportation sales tax in 2029. So I have two questions about that, about funding. One, would the transportation department be considering asking to have that renewed as a ballot measure? And also, what happens when suddenly inflation goes from an average of 5% to about 15% over the last 3 years, when you've allocated funding for projects?
Natalie, do you want to take the first part of that?
Sure, I can take the first part and then it'd be great if you can take the second one. So for the first one, I'll say it's definitely on our minds around the expiring portion of the sales tax dedicated fund for transportation. We're definitely lifting up those conversations with the city manager's office. The city council, as part of their priorities for the coming 2 years, one of their work plan items is to focus on the citywide long-term financial strategy. And transportation, isn't alone. And I think we may be unique in that a portion of our dedicated fund is expiring so soon. But really many of the departments and the city as a whole is really facing some serious financial constraints around how we can continue to deliver the level of service that we're currently providing with our current resources. I think, frankly, I can say that we can't. And Garrett and Karen and I and the leadership team have had some conversations about that as a department, and I'm definitely lifting those up, citywide. But to be determined what the solution will be. I think that we'll be hearing from city council in the coming months and year to see what direction we're headed.
All right, and to answer your second question, Mike, the simplest answer to what we have been doing in recent years is we're doing less. And so on the pavement management program, on the sidewalk programs, and here's a concrete, no pun intended, example for you. When the sidewalk repair program was initiated in 2010, 2011 timeframe, the city was divided into 30 geographic areas, just 30 different zones. And at that time, with the funding that we had in place, the goal was to be able to deliver one zone per year. 3 or 4 years later, we were only able to do 2 zones, or we were able to do 1 zone every 2 years. Now it's taking us 4 years to do 1 zone. And so that's a really great example of, so it just means that we're not able to do all that we've set out to do at the pace that we hoped that we would be able to. And so that on the capital maintenance programs, we're not able to repave as many streets. We're not able to take as care of as many sidewalks. On capital projects, it means we have to be really aggressive at getting as many grant funds in the door as possible so that we can deliver on these projects, since we don't have that many and that much funding of our own to be able to deploy.
And I'll just add to that, and Garrett certainly, and Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think even we're, many times in a situation where we expected a certain bid on a project, and the bids that are coming in are much higher than we expected and budgeted for. And so then we have to go to council for an ATB, an adjustment to base, to seek additional dollars to be able to fund those projects. And that's all coming out of, the same dedicated fund of money that we were talking about that will be seeing a portion of it going away here in the next few years. And so that just takes away from our bottom line, which takes away from all of the capital maintenance and ongoing O&M costs that we need to be able to cover on an annual basis.
Thanks to both of you.
So if I could ask a follow-up question on to Mike's, sort of what do we do with the money running out? A couple of years ago, there was a side working group with TAB and staff about thinking about alternate funding mechanisms, recognizing that maybe the nature of commerce is changing and the way that we're collecting sales tax revenue in the city might not be sufficient to meet our needs. When do we revisit that or resurrect that? Because it seems like the need was apparent a few years ago and it's all the more apparent now. The working group kind of studied a few different ideas, but nothing really came of it. Nothing went further, was, to my mind, to my knowledge, like presented to council as a potential. So how are we going to be more imaginative, I suppose, in collecting revenue in the future?
Yeah, I think, we're certainly interested in continuing those conversations around what, additional or different funding sources we can be considering, and picking up the work that was done. There was a lot of good work that was done. And what, if I recall correctly, it was essentially like kind of right before COVID hit that we had kind of got to a point where we were ready to go and have a conversation with council about it. And then, with COVID hitting, it really just wasn't an appropriate time for us to be able to have those conversations. So it's just been put on hold. And then there's really been, I would say, kind of a shift in perspective as a whole for the city. And it's not necessarily a shift in perspective, but maybe more so that like we're seeing as a whole city, not just transportation, that there's a funding problem, right? And so we're just trying to have a more holistic conversation and bring the entire, all the departments in the entire city into that conversation. So it's not to say that I think we can't, pick up that work again. I think it's just going to be in a more holistic conversation citywide. And I think that would be, we'll potentially be talking about where TAB wants to focus, their priorities or efforts in the coming year at the upcoming retreat. But potentially, funding might be an area that TAB is interested in talking to council about, right? And focusing in that area, since that's on council's, work plan for priorities in the coming years.
Okay, sorry, other questions, TAB members? Not at the moment. Thanks, Garrett. I was wondering on the slide showing the programs, why is there $0 allocated for CAN for 2025, 26, and 27?
That's because we've got funding in place for the priority corridors as standalone projects, which you'll see when we bring the 25 to 30.
So it's not on the programs page, it's on the prior projects page. Okay.
Correct.
And then there is programmatic funding sort of planned in 2028.
Right, and that's sort of a placeholder, as we're not quite sure where we'll be at that point in time, but we wanted to sort of carve out some space. That was where we were at with our financial scenario this time last year. With the little bit darker outlook, we'll see where that takes us as we come back to you in June. But the idea is we do want to try to preserve some of that canned corridor money for 28 as standalone for making that investment in this key priority.
Okay. I appreciate your like defensive parrying about the sidewalk maintenance and splitting the funds with homeowners, because of course you've anticipated my grumpiness about that bit. But I would just kind of like to raise and leave hanging as a question, because I haven't ranted very much this year. To say, like, if walking is as fundamental a mode of transportation as your preface said, then why do we as a city, as a municipality, not fully fund it the way that we fully fund roadway maintenance, fully publicly fund, cleaning up and repairing stuff that happens on the roads and the highways and the bridges? And specifically when you were mentioning bridges, I mean, we'll go back to the transcript, but we don't need to really, but you were saying, these are, in addition to being, of course, things that carry automobiles, some of these bridges are important for pedestrians and transit users and bikers as well. And I would argue if we're living up to our commitment to value all of those modes equally, then they shouldn't at any point in your discussions of these things be sort of add-ons and afterthoughts. And that statement just struck me as an add-on and an afterthought, because it does appear through decades, your predecessors as well, but through decades of budgeting and management and maintenance of the system, that we are baking in auto-centric and baking in some failure to accommodate slower people modes of moving around. So I just like to point it out every time I see it and smell it, just hoping that we can train ourselves to be thinking about it. I am not accusing you of, failing to value these things, but I'm just saying it's inherent in the system, and it's important to recognize it when it raises its head.
I appreciate that, and I guess I would just offer one friendly sort of rebuttal to that, which is that none of our programs are fully funded. So the pavement management program could easily use double the money it gets. The bridge program could use 5 times the money it gets. The sidewalk program needs 4 times the money. So none of them are funded at the level they should be to truly be taking care of them in a proactive way. But in terms of the capital maintenance investment we're making as a percentage of the value of that asset, I would say it's somewhat proportional, in the range of being proportional.
Okay, I appreciate that. Another thing that has occurred to me, and I'm not going to try to delve into discussing Iris, but it's the elephant in the room. Of course, it's going to be for a few months. As a lot of the sort of private feedback that I've heard from people who are very involved and very sort of up to speed on these things, and then some people who are just looking at it for the first time, is a concern about how, like, the sidewalk options appear favorable in some of the not portfolios, the options A through D, and some of them appear we're not doing any changes. And my understanding, and I was hoping to clarify this tonight, my understanding is that those are because of the way we fund stuff. Sidewalky stuff is probably treated as a separate project. We don't tend to, when we're looking at a corridor, yes, great, we're trying to pull all different kinds of money from different things, but the money that actually gets spent on sidewalk improvements might come from a different pool, even if it's happening at the same time and it's part of the same effort as a corridor-wide thing. I'm not sure if I got this right, and if I still don't after 8 years, I'm sorry. But it would help, I think, if I and we had a better understanding of when the projects get broken up into disparate projects, when it feels like they should be integrated, I guess.
Yeah, so as a matter of course, we don't look to bifurcate the funding for pedestrian and sidewalk improvements for the standalone capital projects. The They are a critical element of each of the projects. And so once it's in the CIP, it's not separated or delineated
Yeah,
otherwise.
I think what I'm trying to say though is that the money that we're chasing, the grant funding, is often separated that way. And that might be reflected in how staff is thinking about and communicating with the public about, you know, the order of operations or whatever, like the way that things unfold. Even if it's in the same area, they become disparate projects. So for instance, someone asked me like, oh, Iris, you know, I don't see this thing that we were talking about crossing at 15th showing up on this map. And I'm like, oh no, that's a separate project. That's already separately funded. And to the members of the public, they're like, well, why? Like, that's not different to them, but it's different to us.
So
Yeah.
do you mind if I jump in?
I don't.
Okay, well, so I think in my mind, that's a bit of a different situation, right? Because it's not so much about like a mode being bifurcated out of that. Like that project was just a project that was on the work plan, you know, many years because there was a need to look at crossing improvements at 15th and Iris. And we went after a grant, and I mean, that's been on the books for many years. And so that, you know, it's not so much like, oh, that was an improvement that was bifurcated from the overall project. And I think the thing about that we can just clearly say is that all 4 options for Iris that are moving forward will include sidewalk improvements.
Thank you.
And so it's not like we're going into the can doesn't say, well, you can only make bike lane improvements, right? Like it's a transportation improvement project. It's going to benefit all modes, even people traveling by car, right? Like we have been saying that over and over again.
Right.
So hopefully that like helps. Just, I think like your question was, are we bifurcating a mode in these projects? And we're not. Like that's not we generally try to be making it better for everybody using a corridor, right? Or
sure. I'm saying that a number of people who are studying option A versus option D are seeing differences in the sidewalk treatments and improvements on those and thinking, aha, those sidewalk improvements are only folded into option D. And my understanding is that's not correct.
That's not correct. I think the reason people may be coming to that conclusion is because, you know, in C and D, we're completely having to rebuild the curb and gutter sidewalks, right? And so it just might be more intuitive for people that like that's what they hear, and so it's going to be rebuilt. But we'll be making sidewalk improvements in A and B as well.
Okay, Darcy, your hand is up. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to build on that a little bit. So you know, it's clear to me that across these projects, you know, you've designated that pedestrian, bike, roadway improvements, you know, that you've got certain percentages for each of those uses, and that you can see that they are kind of built in. But just further a little bit to Tila's point, multi-use paths. So how are those kind of distinctly designated from, say, sidewalks in these projects? So like the pavement management program, you know, is maybe looking at the entire roadway, including the sidewalks and bike lanes and all that stuff. But multi-use paths, are they funded completely separately? Or are they, maybe I'm just not catching how those are really distinct projects from larger roadway improvements and what the implications are for that, I guess, for funding.
It's a great question. I'm glad you asked, Darcy. So you're correct that I want to clarify. So the pavement management program, this is to help further your understanding of the scope of that program. In a given year, it will spend approximately 30% of the budget not on street pavement, but on upgrading the adjacent concrete sidewalk and curb ramps. So there are a number of benefits that are happening through the PMP across the system to make travel better for all users. And that is also the case when we touch multi-use paths as part of the PMP. But the multi-use path investment is more for the paths that follow greenways. So whether it's Boulder Creek or Goose Creek or Skunk Creek or Bear Creek, The most recent major maintenance that a lot of folks saw was in the community gardens, Longs Gardens area, where we repaved all the paths from asphalt to concrete. That took place via the multi-use path maintenance, because the street PMP is never going to be able to touch something like that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I mean, it's such a vital network, and we depend on it as pedestrians and bicyclists. And so it's really good to hear how these projects are distinct from the others. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions right now for Garrett, and Brian? All right, we will see you next month. Thank you for this. I will say it gets a lot more detailed next month. So tab members do kind of schedule some time to really pour over it. I expect after the discussion next month, we will be seeing if there's appetite to have one of those other little mini study sessions that Garrett so nicely quasi offered to do. And so just have a sense of how comfortable you're feeling with what you understand with these projects, and whether you have want to do some deeper dives, because we will probably have time to do that if we've prepared enough. Thank you, Garrett.
Thank you.
Hey, so we will move on now to the PMP, the Pavement Management Program Mobility Enhancements Overview. This is item 7 on the agenda.
All right, so I'm going to introduce this one. We've got James Smith, our pavement program manager, and Daniel Sheeter, who are going to be presenting this. And I just wanted to give a bit of a preface to introduce that the pavement management program for many, many years was focused on just taking care of the maintenance side of things. And in recent years, we've been growing the focus of that to implement mobility enhancements around the system, so that as we have contractor resources deployed in a given area, we can try to introduce better and safer treatments for our vulnerable road users. And so I'm going to hand it off now to James to provide the overview of the PMP, and then Daniel will talk about the mobility enhancement side of things.
Thanks, Garrett. Can everybody hear me okay? Awesome. I'm James Smith. I'm the pavement manager, and I'm joined by Daniel Sheeter, principal transportation planner, and he'll talk about the mobility enhancements here later on in this presentation. And then Garrett, are you controlling the slides, or is that Dan?
It's me, I think. Yeah, is that coming through for everybody?
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, Daniel. Appreciate it. All right. So the pavement management program was established by the Transportation Division to maintain Boulder's 300-mile street system in a good condition. With this program, all streets are inspected on a 3-year interval to maintain awareness of existing conditions and guide where pavement rehabilitation work will be made in future years. So we can go on to the next slide there. So with these inspections, our streets are rated on the Pavement Condition Index scale. The PCI is a numerical rating system commonly used by transportation agencies to indicate the general condition of pavement infrastructure. And it's developed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The PCI is based on a visual survey of the number and types of distresses in a pavement. PCI ratings range from 0 to 100, with 100 representing the best possible conditions. We can go on to the next slide. So the goal of the pavement management program is to identify the optimal level of funding, timing, and renewal strategies that will keep the roadway network at or above a good PCI. Here we see a typical pavement degradation curve. And you can see by spending money on good streets, we extend the life and avoid more costly repairs in the future. So we want to optimize the right treatment at the right time in an asset life cycle. And our strategy really is keeping our good roads good, so we're not spending a whole lot of money on in the future when they get really bad. So we go on to the next slide. Here we kind of see, or we see, sorry, our typical street treatments that we do. Crack sealing, we typically do after we've resurfaced the street within 3 to 5 years. And this helps seal up the road and prevent water from infiltrating and causing potholes or sub-base damage that can create larger failures in the future. And it extends our pavement life 2 to 3 years. Chip sealing is another common one that we do on our local kind of lower volume streets. And it's a layer of sealant that goes down and then topped with a crushed stone. And this extends our pavement life. It could be up 5 to 10 years. And then the most common one is our asphalt resurfacing treatment. This is where we remove 2 or more inches of the existing asphalt and replace it with a fresh layer. And we typically see a life extension of 15 to 20 years there. And then our most costly treatment is our street reconstruction. And this is the full removal of all asphalt and sometimes even the subgrade and reworking and placing it back. And this is where streets are completely failed. So we can move on to the next slide. So here for existing conditions, we designate our roads by local, arterial, and collector with 71% local, 17% arterial, and 12% collector. And here on this graph, you can kind of see the distribution of those streets and their PCI ratings. Right now, for 2024, we're reporting an average PCI for the network at a 77, so not terrible. We can move on to the next slide. Also, the PMP kind of leverages outside resources, one of which being the Colorado Asphalt Pavement Association. And they conduct a survey of all local agencies to see how much money they're spending and what their PCIs are generally. And this helps us kind of gauge where we're at. And we can see that we're in line with a lot of agencies and we have a pretty competitive PCI. And then finally, move on and hand it over to Daniel for talking about how we're integrating the mobility enhancements now.
Great, thanks, James. Daniel Sheeter, Principal Transportation Planner in the Planning Division. So as James mentioned and Garrett too, mobility enhancements are coordinated with the pavement management program as a cost-effective and efficient way to make Boulder streets safer for people walking, biking, rolling, driving, and taking transit. Due to available resources, mobility enhancements are typically limited to signage and striping changes, such as new crosswalks or restripe bike lanes, but can sometimes propose more complex elements. 2 benefits that I'd like to highlight related to aligning with the PMP are that striping changes can be incorporated into already planned repaving work, and that traffic impacts can also be minimized since traffic control is coordinated with the overall PMP scope, which could entail chip seal or resurfacing or roadway reconstruction. So identifying opportunities for mobility enhancements hinges on early identification of which streets will be candidates for repaving. This allows for interdepartmental coordination if repaving needs to be coordinated with projects led by other departments, such as planned utility work. Within transportation mobility, a multidisciplinary team of capital projects, operations, maintenance, and planning staff develops designs that are informed by existing conditions analysis, the city's design and construction standards, what we hear from the community, and planning document recommendations like those from the Transportation Master Plan or the Low Stress Walk and Bike Plan. Planning staff also lead community engagement for any proposed enhancements. And the goal of this approach is to identify potential mobility enhancements as early as possible so that there is ample time for design development and construction planning. The maps on this slide show this year's paving plan for 2024 and a preliminary resurfacing plan for the 2025 paving year on the right. So who doesn't love a good slideshow of before after pictures? I'll walk through some examples of some recent mobility enhancements. This first one is not a photo, but a screenshot of a striping plan for Balsam Avenue and Edgewood Avenue. And the Mobility Enhancements Initiative implemented a minor striping change to that corridor last year that was designed in-house to narrow vehicle lanes to standard widths and add a buffer to the westbound bike lane. The next project is one that Brian mentioned, the Baseline Road Transportation Safety Improvements Project. Initial phase 1 improvements were coordinated with repaving last summer and included installing segments of tall curb protected bike lanes between 30th and Foothills. Post-separated bike lanes were also implemented between 30th Street and the 28th Street US 36 interchange as an upgrade to existing painted 5-foot bike lanes. The phase 2 project Brian mentioned is just east of 30th, between 30th and Foothills. And these photos show that tall curb as well as some vinyl wraps with art from a local artist. Continuing with Baseline, intersection tightening at side streets and a quick build protected intersection at Baseline and Mohawk were also installed last summer. Many of these enhancements will be made permanent as part of the more comprehensive phase 2 project, which kicked off earlier this year. The intersection tightening utilized paint and post treatments to slow the speed of turning vehicles and reduce conflicts between people biking and driving. And the quick build intersection improvements enhanced the north-south bikeway on Mohawk Drive and provide a dedicated space for people on bikes to wait or make turns at the intersection, as well as calmed speeds for turning vehicles. For 2024, concrete work on Moorhead Avenue for the mobility enhancements there have been completed. The enhancements include splitter islands to calm traffic at key pedestrian crossings. And there in the photo is the Bear Creek crossing and the recently installed splitter islands there, as well as a new pedestrian crossing near the Highmar Senior Housing Community and post office at the south end of the corridor. So the PMP also repairs many aspects of street infrastructure to bring it up to a state of good repair. These aren't technically categorized as mobility enhancements, but they do bring about safety benefits as well. So in the case of Moorhead, this example is a before-after of a drainage inlet that was replaced and relocated out of the gutter pan, which improves the safety and comfort of the on-street bike lane there. Mobility enhancements are also coordinated with Americans with Disability Act or ADA improvements, including the reconstruction of curb ramps. So in this case, you see an example of directional curb ramps that were installed along the corridor, as well as the detectable warning surface. And the before photo on the left, you can see that there is not ample space to wait at those curb ramps, the existing curb ramps, and there weren't domes, those detectable warning surfaces before. So those are all brought up to ADA standards. The final example was completed just a few weeks ago at the Broadway multi-use path underpass to Lashley Lane in South Boulder. As you can see in the photo at the top of the slide, the crossing lacked a receiving curb ramp on the east side of the street, and a small median island created a pinch point near the underpass opening. The crossing was upgraded to remove the median island, as well as bulb out the east side sidewalk to shorten the crossing distance and install a new curb ramp. The detectable warning surfaces were also added to the west side curb ramp there in the photo. So for 2024, we basically have two corridors for mobility enhancements this year. East Baseline will see mobility enhancements this year from Foothills Parkway to 55th Street. So operational enhancements are planned to improve multimodal travel and safety. And for Moorhead, I shared some examples of the initial construction earlier in the presentation. The final phase of implementation will begin with repaving next week, weather dependent, and will include restriping and installation of speed cushions at the conclusion of resurfacing. And with that, James and I are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Daniel. Questions? Tab. Thank you. I can see you all. Hi, Darcy, go ahead.
It's not really a question. I just wanted to thank you for that change you made to the paving on Lashley, you know, at that underpass, because that really was hazardous with bicyclists and pedestrians interacting at that space with that weird little island that was there. So I really appreciate that being taken care of and opened up, and the receiving ramp on the other side with the widened pavement on the other side. That really will make a huge difference. This is part of a series of walks that I lead with my group on the Walk 360 and other places, and that's always been a really difficult pinch point, just because bicyclists are also very active through there. So I really appreciate that change. And all of these look really positive and important. I'd love to hear from Jen about how these the new directional ramps and the domes, how functional that is for wheelchair users, and whether these improvements are really enhancing mobility on those areas.
It's Darcy. I really don't know, because I need to have real experience, but it looks good from what I can tell.
Thank you, Darcy, for mentioning that. I'll share that with my team. The Lashley Lane was kind of it was an ADA upgrade as well that kind of came about because Lashley was resurfaced. So it's good to hear good feedback on that, and I'll share that with my team. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Improving all of these places that were so narrow and just difficult to traverse, and especially for people with any kind of mobility device, I imagine that all of these improvements are really beneficial. So thank you.
So to that end, since I don't see hands up, but feel free to raise your hands, Tab, if you have other stuff. Sort of further to my comment about different sources of funding and different projects, and it not making a whole lot of sense necessarily from the public facing side. In my neighborhood, which just had a whole bunch of, maybe it's still ongoing, I haven't looked around for the last couple of days, just a lot of ramp replacement and upgrading and, correcting drainage, and it's all terrific. And in between those ramps, of course, we have large slates of stone, natural stone. I'm in Mapleton Hill, which get heaved up or broken or, cracked, or trees. And it's the sidewalks between those ramps that are fairly impassable. And so it's a very piecemeal, token step in the right direction. But in terms of that project fundamentally changing the ease for people to get around, it hasn't changed. My grandfather stayed here with us for 10 years ago, and he was like, I am not walking around this neighborhood. That's not safe for me, because of the condition of the sidewalks. So
I
it's
can,
just
yeah, I can
I know
speak
you
to
can't
a little
change
bit.
everything all at once.
Yeah,
There's no fairy with a magic wand that's going to give us all the money to do everything with all that we want.
Sure.
But
Mhm.
that's just an expression of what I was trying to describe earlier.
Sure.
About.
Sure. Yeah. And like Garrett said, so Mapleton Hill is in the annual sidewalk repair program, and
Sure.
when we could do one zone in 1 year, we're now doing one zone in 4, and and the stone replacements are quite expensive. So we're trying to get the ADA upgrades done now, and then we will be coming back for the rest of the sidewalk.
So when you say stone
As type of
replacements, you mean you're replacing the stone with concrete or with other stone?
No, we'll be either resetting the existing stone or replacing with new flagstone.
Interesting. Is this a landmarksy thing? Is this why?
Yeah, that's my understanding. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and Garrett may know the history on this. I think it's community preference. We've heard pretty robust feedback about replacing it for like material.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, they're among other absolute no's, like thou shalt not move the band shell, thou shalt not replace flagstone with concrete.
And that's such a perfect segue to my next question, which is, I think some of these things, I love the before and afters. Thank you, Daniel. And some of these things, I'm sure if you had floated the ideas to take away that that weird little pinch point that Darcy was just talking about for Lashley, that was probably put in specifically to slow down bicycles because of a concern that they would be going too fast when they're coming in and out of the tunnel. It's slightly downhill as they're entering the street. You know, good reasons to have it. It didn't work very well, but I'm sure you could have shown two Boulderites that thing and you'd get 5 different opinions out of them about whether it was an okay thing to do. And so this is one of those times where I think, hooray, we can just move to the informed level of community engagement because, you know, we are relying on city staff and engineering expertise to just go ahead with it. And I continue to just still scratch my head, like why sometimes for some projects we defer to community input, like thou shalt not replace my sandstone sidewalk, to instead overruling that and saying, I'm sorry, we have standards about how people get around. And if it's getting in the way of basic mobility for, wait, what did Garrett say? One of the most fundamental ways to move around in town, we ought to be able at some point to like exercise legislative and administrative fiat to say, this is regrettable, we'll color it red if you want red sidewalk. I personally love the stone, but I am very able, you know, bodied and fleet-footed and whatever. I sure, if I was running around the neighborhood, I wouldn't run on our sidewalks because I'm clumsy. So it's not, they're not up to standard. And for us to defer, I think, to, frankly, my rich neighbors on what should be a public policy decision is wrong. There, rant number 2. I was doing so well, and here we are in May, and I'm just
I think I'll just say, you know, without taking an opinion really on
of course.
is right, of course, is that when we have a funding discussion as a city around the level of service that we can afford to provide for the future, I think those are really important points to bring up.
Great. Darcy, you have your hand up again or still?
That again, I just wanted to ask if that has, so the 50% partnership on sidewalk maintenance replacement has, so you say that, you know, people are very adamant that they want those flagstone sidewalks where they're historical. Is there, could there be a cost argument to be made for improving, you know, like it would be cheaper for you if we did this, and is there some way, I mean, I don't know if the residents of that community, like Tila mentioned, are just so committed to having that historical kind of precedent maintained, but you know, there's a really big cost differential, I imagine, there, you know, with replacing and improving those sidewalks for the homeowners adjacent to them. So I don't know, I guess that's just a comment.
It's a good comment, Darcy. In the past, when that point was raised with residents and in the historic district, it wasn't a persuasive one at that time.
Mm-hmm. I have so many thoughts about landmarks and historic districts, but oh darn, Jen raised her hand, so I'll defer to Jen.
I just want to know, are the flagstone sidewalks not an ADA violation?
It's a good question, Garrett. Do you know, does the flagstone, once it's you know, once we've had a chance to go back and repair it from, you know, just the aging kind of state that it's been in, does it meet kind of our ADA standards?
Yeah. So my understanding is that when it goes back and gets installed, that it's done so consistent with our program criteria, where the horizontal and vertical displacement is within certain tolerances. the challenge with that is that over time, the sandstone is more likely to move than concrete. So at the time of installation, it is in compliance, but there's not a guarantee that it will stay in that form over the years.
Right. Mike,
Oh.
sorry, go ahead, Jen.
I think that needs to be revisited because I mean, I know I'm new, I don't really know the rules, but it seems to me if it's ADA compliant now, should not mean that it's okay in the future.
Gotcha. Mike, go ahead.
Oh, I wanted to second what Tila raised about making sure we come up with standards and move forward based on best practices. And as Tila alluded to, there are often well-connected and loud voices that participate in community engagement that are not necessarily reflective of the population that elects our city council. So I understand there can be backlash to some things that people who believe in cars as the primary way of getting around might have, but I hope we can come up with standards that recognize city where, you know, biking and walking are safe on all of our streets that aren't limited access highways. Thanks.
I just want to clarify, Mike, that my comment was not so much about like the representativeness of people and their opinions, but just that at a certain point, governmental expertise and legislative expertise and engineering expertise is going to give us the right answer for achieving some of the goals and the requirements, you know, that we have as a municipality. And for some of these projects, I really think that over engagement and too high of an expectation of engagement by our community members is getting in the way of us actually achieving progress and our goals and meeting our responsibilities.
I did want to point out that the ability to use flagstone and sandstone is actually in city code. And I posted a link to that subsection in the chat. It's section 8-2-17 part C that says that if a property owner wants to use sandstone, they can. So it's currently in the residents have that right by city code today.
That's great. I'm curious. I'll take a look at that. I doubt that it has a heightened responsibility to maintain it. Because of course we know that, you know, concrete panels can also lift up with trees over time. It's not necessarily, you know, so defective, or concrete's not necessarily completely superior all the time. But I think it is implicit in our conversation tonight that flagstone is more likely to move than concrete. It is more likely to come out of compliance. And I think that's where Jen was suggesting maybe we need to revisit our thinking about it. Not that it's your job to think about it, Garrett. It's in the city code. That would be a city council thing. Or perhaps city attorneys. Okay, is this horse dead? Shall we move on? Sorry, I let this go on so long. I'm seeing no further hands up from tab members. So with that, we will close agenda item 7. Thank you, everyone. And we'll move now to matters from staff.
Thanks, Sheila. We have a couple matters tonight. Our first one will be a Sumac Avenue project update, and I think Garrett's kicking us off on that one. Garrett's the star of the show tonight.
All right. So I think Tila might recall that we started the Sumac Avenue project back in 2018, 2019 timeframe. and it was put on pause. It was one of the projects and efforts that was put on pause as a result of the financial impacts of COVID. And we have now revived this project, and it is moving forward. And so a number of the residents are interested to hear where things stand with it. And John McFarlane, our transportation planner, and Roger Kane, our project manager, are here this evening to provide an update on Sumac.
Yeah, thank you, Garrett, and good evening, TAB members. My name is John McFarlane, Senior Transportation Planner in the Planning Division. Give me 1 second here. There we go. Okay. So yeah, as Garrett mentioned, I'll be giving an update on the Sumac Avenue project. Tonight, I'll be sharing information on project context and background, past project work. As Garrett mentioned, it was paused in 2020 during COVID, restart of the project, and then next steps. Okay, so the limits for improvements on Sumac Avenue are between 19th Street on the east and Broadway on the west, as shown in the map on the right. Sumac Avenue is an important corridor in North Boulder for east-west connectivity to schools, recreational destinations, including Crestview Elementary and Crestview Park on the corridor, private schools on the east end of the corridor. There's Tara Performing Arts and Boulder Waldorf on the east end on 19th. And then also on the west end of the corridor is the Wonderland Lake Trailhead. In addition to improvements on Sumac, there are also several city projects currently in planning, design, and construction as shown on the map, and then future projects identified in the Transportation Master Plan that this project will connect into. So after this presentation, you'll hear more about the 19th Street projects, but we've got the 19th Street and 4 Mile Canyon Creek Underpass project currently in construction between Sumac and Upland, and then beginning construction later this spring is the 19th Street multimodal improvement projects between Norwood and Sumac. And then at the west end of the corridor, open space and mountain parks is leading site improvements at Wonderland Lake Trailhead. Parks and Recreation is also leading planning and design of the future park on Violet, which will include a multi-use path connection on the 4 Mile Canyon Creek corridor and future improvements to Violet Avenue with park development. And then in the longer term, we are also pursuing, we're going to submit a Safe Routes to School grant application this fall for a missing sidewalk links project on the south side of Upland that would connect into the 19th and 4 Mile Canyon Creek underpass and could provide a future low stress connection to the future park on Violet with a future multi-use path completion here on 17th Street, which is identified in the Transportation Master Plan. And then finally, the Sumac Avenue project is guided by the Transportation Master Plan, which identifies missing sidewalk links on Sumac. Currently, there is only a sidewalk on the north side of Sumac between 19th and the western edge of Crestview Park. And the low stress walk and bike network plan also identifies Sumac as a neighborhood green street between 19th Street and 15th Street. So due to poor local roadway drainage, discontinuous sidewalks, and deteriorating pavement conditions, the project's main focus when it began in 2019 was to address these needs. The project began in spring 2019, but was paused in early 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic and for staffing and financial reasons and constraints. On the left is a timeline before the project was paused. Through 2019 and early 2020, staff conducted an existing condition analysis and introduced the project to the Transportation Advisory Board in October of 2019. Staff also hosted a variety of public engagement opportunities, including 2 public open houses and other ways community members could provide input on the project, such as a partnership with Growing Up Boulder to learn how students and families of Crestview use Sumac to travel to and from school. These efforts resulted in over 200 public comments on the project. Staff also began concept design and presented several high-level street design options for public feedback in February 2020. The design options focused on drainage, sidewalks, and on-street parking. During engagement and in the 200+ comments we received, we heard a strong preference from the community for curb and gutter drainage along the corridor, the need for a continuous sidewalk or multi-use path, and to preserve both on-street parking and landscaping where feasible. On the right is a timeline for the project as we restarted the work at the end of 2023. As we restarted concept design, we have had the opportunity to revisit public comments we heard and introduce new project elements for public feedback. These include traffic calming measures to slow vehicle speeds along the corridor and working with open space and mountain parks to coordinate their site design improvements at the Wonderland Lake Trailhead with a new pedestrian crossing at Sumac and Broadway. We are also working closely with our colleagues in Parks and Recreation on connections to the future Violet Park and have discussed potential improvements with Crestview administration as well. Later this week, on Wednesday, in a couple days here, we'll be hosting an in-person public open house to share designs with the community. As we move toward final design, we'll also be engaging property owners one-on-one and exploring funding options for the project. One option for funding could be exercising existing annexation agreements for project cost sharing with residents. Pending funding and permitting approvals, project construction could take place as early as the summer of 2025. So as I mentioned, our next step in the project will be hosting the public open house this Wednesday from 5 to 7 p.m. at Crestview Elementary. And there's an opportunity for board members to attend and share this opportunity with others. We'll also be posting the open house materials online via Be Heard Boulder after the event to provide an opportunity for those who are unable to attend to share feedback on the project. This concludes my presentation and update on the project, and we're happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Thank you. I'm looking for hands. Any hands tab? Looks like Darcy knows all about it. That's her in the picture.
I know all about this.
Go ahead.
As you can see, I've been intimately involved in this project before. Yeah, so
That was 6 inches of hair ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. 2019, a lot has happened since then. But I checked in with Growing Up Boulder about these posters, and unfortunately they no longer have them, but I have sent the original photos to Mara Mincer if they want to get those reprinted, or I don't know if you have any interest in, John, in having another set of these or having it on a digital asset of some sort at the open house. I think it would be valuable for the families who were originally involved in this project to see that their voices are still being heard. But anyway, that aside, I appreciate that you've picked up this project again and that it's moving forward. It's of great value to that community, and we heard so many ideas and interests and comments from both Crestview students and parents, but also property owners along Sumac who no longer have children at Crestview or have kind of moved there since their families have moved on. So there's a great variety of interest in improvements to this street, and I'm excited to hear what you hear. Unfortunately, I'm actually not going to be able to attend the open house on Wednesday as I hoped I would be able to. So I'm going to be at a retreat, but I hope it goes really well, and I'm eager to hear the outcomes from this, and I'm really excited just to see it moving forward. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Darcy. And I would love to have the boards and be able to share them at the open house if you can send them my way.
Great, thanks. Anyone else? John, right at the end, you hit on funding for this project, and from my vague memories of it before, I thought that this project was almost entirely funded by those, I don't know what you're calling them, but like
the annexation agreements.
Yeah, from the annexation agreements with individual landowners along here, right? It was folded into their property purchase. Are you saying now that that's not sufficient to fund the project, or I guess we don't know because we haven't picked the final design?
I'll jump in and respond to that one, Tila, and say, so the annexation agreement obligations never required them to generally contribute more than half of the total cost. And so the formula is still to be determined, but that's sort of a general guideline for right now.
Okay, and was half including the roadway? For some reason, I thought it was about half for the drainage and sidewalks.
So unfortunately, the precise language of each of the annexation agreements is a little bit different.
Okay.
Some of them specify roads, some of them are less specific. And so we'll be working with the city attorney's office on what is reasonable as we move forward in the process.
Interesting. All right. Thank you. I don't think we have any other hands. Appreciate the update. I also will not be able to make the 15th. But carry on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have one more matters item, and
Yeah.
Garrett's going to kick that one off as well on 19th Street.
Right. So there are, as a reminder, two 19th Street projects that are taking place. One is the 4 Mile Canyon Creek underpass work between Sumac and Upland, which is already under construction and creating some travel impacts for those in North Boulder. And then the other 19th Street project is one that has been in the planning and design phase for some time, and we're very excited to now be in the construction phase. And Lindsay Mers, our project manager, is here to provide an update about that one.
Yeah, so it says I can't share my screen.
I have the presentation here if you want me to share from my computer, Lindsay.
Yeah, it just says the host disabled participant screen sharing, so I'm not able to. If you're able to, Garrett, that works.
Can you try again? Okay.
Okay,
That's
thank you. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be back at TAB presenting on this project. So this is the 19th Street Multimodal Improvements Project. So this is the project that runs from Norwood Avenue to just north of Sumac Avenue. And so like Garrett said, I'm just here to give kind of a project construction update. And so from a project team and funding standpoint, so city staff, so I'm the project manager working on this project, and then John McFarland, who just presented on Sumac, he is the planner on this project. The contractor that was our low bid contractor was Goodland Construction Inc. With Ben Warland, the project manager. I've worked with them before. They're great. If any of you are around when I did the Andrus to Airport Phase 1 path, they are the ones that actually constructed that. So I'm really looking forward to working with them on this project. Funding for the 19th Street Multimodal comes from the Transportation Alternatives Program, the TAP funding from CDOT, and then city transportation funds. Next one. And so here's the project location. So as Garrett had mentioned, and even John earlier, there are two 19th Street projects. So the 19th Street and 4 Mile Canyon Creek Underpass project is the project that's located up near Upland. And that's a project that's currently in construction right there in front of Crestview. This project picks up right there. They actually tie and connect together, and then we carry it south all the way down to Norwood. And as you can see, there's 4 schools, right in the vicinity of both of these projects. And then there's a fire station up near Violet. So and then we have the 4 Mile Canyon Creek and then Wonderland Creek. So just a lot happening in these 2 project locations. And so the construction, well, let me actually go through the scope of the project. So for the project, we're going to install continuous sidewalks on both sides of 19th Street. We're going to upgrade the existing shoulder to buffered bike lanes. So any of the on-street parking won't actually be there, but we're going to put buffered bike lanes, striped buffered bike lanes. So it'd be similar to parts of Folsom. We're going to install traffic calming, which is speed cushions, and we're going to reduce this posted speed limit to 25 along that corridor between Norwood and Upland. And then we're going to upgrade and install pedestrian curb ramps and crossing enhancements. We're going to improve the RTD bus stops. We're going to replace the Wonderland Creek box culvert. It's actually currently just a pipe. It's going to become a much larger box culvert. And then I'm installing new storm sewer pipe and drainage inlets from Sumac down to Wonderland Creek. And construction timeline. And so this project, the 19th Street Multimodal Improvements Project, we're just about to start that. We've, I would imagine, I believe tree removal start the 22nd. So we're a week out from actually starting activity out in this area between Norwood and Sumac. And construction will last until about August of next year. And then the underpass project started in March, and it's going to take a couple years. So till February of 2026. So we have a project website. The project website actually has both projects on that. We also have a project phone number that covers both projects. We're using Boulder Cone Zones to kind of advertise some of the impacts out there. And then we are coordinating directly with the schools as impacts and different things change. And so that wraps up the quick update on that one. This is great news. This is a long time coming.
Yeah, I was gonna jump in and just say that this is a huge milestone. Big congratulations to Lindsay on getting us to construction on this project. It has been a long time coming and kind of a hard road at times. So
it's
great.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie.
Yeah. Questions tab? Oh, Mike, go ahead. Your yellow hand blends in with your background.
I just raised it seconds ago.
Okay.
So what is the situation there with, are there anything that is like a bike lane there? And what's the, what would it take to get a protected bike lane there? Is that a budget increase when you do something like this?
Yeah, so was your first question what's there today? Is that your first? Yeah, so today, it depends which direction you're going. Southbound, it feels like just a shoulder, right? Because there's no curb, there's no sidewalk. Northbound, there's kind of a funky curb, we'll call it curb blocks, right? And so that feels more like what a bike lane would feel like. And so then this project, this corridor was identified as buffered bike lanes. And Garrett, remind me which plan that was identified in. I want to say the
it's the low stress bike plan
yeah.
from 2019 recommends the 19th Street to be a buffered bike lane treatment.
Yes, thank you. So that's what, that's why that was carried forward.
And that's a factor that depends on the traffic on that street, I assume.
Right. Correct. It's the traffic volume as well as the travel speed. And as Lindsay noted, the project will also be incorporating speed mitigation as a project element, which should reduce some of the stress of vehicular traffic adjacent to those bike lanes.
Thank you.
Also, the addition of sidewalks is going to help because, our city ordinance says you can ride your bike on the sidewalk. And I remember I've done a couple of walkthroughs with Lindsay on this project. I think that was the first time I met you. And we did note, we did different times of day on purpose, but we noted sort of presence of young aged cyclists, which was sort of unusual from just, man on the street perspective, purely anecdotal, but we noted a high number of kids already on that street. So it was also indicating to us that the stress level wasn't incredibly bad, could be improved. And I think this will help quite a lot. Lindsay, I remember that there were, because the profiles block to block and even property to property were different, there were a whole lot of concerns about the drainage and maybe trying to not use eminent domain, but that some of the properties appeared to sort of encroach into the public sphere. And we were talking about maybe having to acquire right of way by might or by money. How did that go?
Yeah, we did. So there were, I believe we landed on, 4 permanent easement. Unfortunately, one of the residents ended up passing away and the city ended up purchasing this property. So I think we landed on 3 permanent easements. One was pretty considerable. It was the one on the east side of Wonderland Creek, but that also became a flood and drainage easement. That wasn't, that was really kind of expanding the fact that there should have probably always been a flood and drainage easement. So we landed, I think, on 3 permanents and then about 22 temporary easements. And so those are just to be able to tie driveways back in. But really the nature of the design with the new storm system and the new box, from a drainage standpoint, I'm really, the ultimate goal when it related to drainage was to not change it really from what it's wanting to do today. And in fact, really try to improve it, which we know will happen. I'd say probably in most places, because we're taking that kind of sheet flow and we're collecting it and dropping it into, roadside ditches, which, I will work to improve and make better. And so, yeah, we didn't actually have to do any type of major acquisitions.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
What is the plan for now that there's a bus and a bike lane and a buffered bike lane? What's the plan at the bus stops? What's the nature of the bus stop improvements actually?
So the bus stops improvements, so it's going to be just, the buses will pull off and block the bike lane, right? So we're not doing any type of floating bus islands. They'll
Mhm.
actually just pull over to the transit stops. The improvements really come from, I don't know how often you've driven out or people have used or walked 19th. We have bus stops literally now that are like grass ditches. I mean, there's
Right.
literally a sign in right up there north of Quince is one, or right there south of Redwood is one example. And so we're going to just provide a landing space for people. In some instances, it's in like a detached sidewalk area. So it's a dedicated little pad for the bus stop. And in some cases, it is that the sidewalk will operate as the transit stop. But just that in and of itself will become an improvement. But yeah, the bus will actually pull over, pick up, and then pull back into the travel lane.
I recall at one point we were talking about trying to install benches, at least in some of these more frequently used stops along here. I think the answer that I got at the time was we would have to approach RTD for funding for that. I have no idea if there was any follow through. Are there any benches happening?
There are benches happening, not every bus
Great.
stop. So not every bus stop warranted it.
Right.
And actually, I don't think we're doing any bike racks. None of them warranted the bike racks. We just weren't seeing that type of use, though that doesn't negate being able to put those in the future. And so,
Right.
but yeah, I'd say the stops where you see either the makeshift benches, I believe there's 3 for both projects, and they're the southbound direction primarily.
Yes.
The northbound,
Yeah.
we found people weren't really milling around to need the benching, but yes. So I want to say there's 2 or 3 that are getting a bench.
Great.
Yes. Yeah.
Any other questions on this? Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks for including the project webpage, which reminded me I had a question way up on PMP that I didn't get to ask.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. If I can ask a quick question back on the PMP, item 7, it is this. If members of the public wanted to find out, like, when is my street going to be, instead of putting in an Inquire Boulder ticket or whatever, where would they look to find out where their street of concern is on the schedule?
I'm not sure if James is still with us. If you're here, James, feel free to chime in, but I'll jump in and say that typically as we're looking out ahead with the PMP, we're not super eager to share beyond the next year because so much can change in a year to year, depending on how hard the winter is, how hard or how much precipitation we might get, and contractor pricing changing from year to year. There's James, so I'll stop talking and let him speak.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, just continuing that. Yeah, so there's a lot of variability, the plan, so it could change quite a bit. We do have the pavement management website up and are sharing a map out of the current year.
Of this year, okay.
Yeah, of this year. We actually put quite a bit of work into the website this year and made it a more accessible map that they could kind of navigate through and see what kind of treatments are coming up to their streets. And we are working on kind of a more out year look plan Whether we share it out with the public, I'll kind of work with Garrett on that.
Okay.
But yeah, right now, just kind of requesting where my street is and kind of where it is
Is the
how,
best
how
way to
we're
go.
handling them. Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. Sorry, I forgot to do that one, but thanks for sticking around.
Yep.
All right, any other questions on this item on 19th Street projects? Yes, Darcy.
Just one quick thing. So one of the things we found, when I was working with Growing Up Boulder on 19th Street in general, not just Sumac, but 19th Street, we saw a lot of issues with crossings, with pedestrian crossings on 19th Street, and just drivers not yielding, especially to young people as they were waiting to cross the street. I'm wondering what improvements are going to be made to those crossings, and if there are some RFBs or anything else going in on 19th Street. I don't know if, I think she
Did Lindsay drop off?
Lindsay ran away.
dropped off. Sorry, I should have asked earlier. But that was a big issue that we noticed, that the crossings on 19th Street were really problematic. And I'm hoping that those will be improved as well, not just the sidewalks, which is also essential because there are so many missing links along there. So that's really wonderful.
Yeah. And is it true, now that she's gone, is it true that this only goes from the north side of Norwood? It doesn't actually include the Norwood intersection?
That's
I remember
correct.
that. Okay.
That's correct.
The map she showed looks like the green line goes to the bottom of the Norwood intersection. So just be careful of that because it was a big point of contention before.
And
I'll jump
I
in.
was
I'll
just,
jump in too.
I don't know if James or Garrett have information about the crossings, but we can certainly just follow up with information regarding that question, Darcy.
And I'll just jump into, we are looking at north of Norwood for pavement management, pavement improvements there. So I think in future years, on the heels of the project, we'll look to see what we can do there.
Okay, yeah. There is a lot of consternation, partly largely because of speeds and sightlines. That intersection itself is a problem as opposed to north of that. Okay. We do what we do when we can do it. Thank you. So I think that's it now on that one. And so we will move to matters from the board. Let's quickly revisit representatives and alternates for just the two committees that we have identified as likely to need some tab input. Jen, you weren't here before, excuse me. So there are two kind of, often there's some ongoing collaboration or sometimes multi board things going on where we need to send a representative of TAB to participate on behalf of TAB and then come back and report what happened. This year we are anticipating we'll need a TAB member to participate with the Vision Zero Community Partnership Committee, and then one for the Pedestrian Crossing Treatment Installation Guidelines Working Group. I've been involved with the Vision Zero one for this next year. I believe Trini wanted to take that on, and I was the alternate. There's, under our rules, 2 TAB members can go, no more than 2, but we pick one person who's gonna be committed to it, and the alternate will be the next one in line. But in any one of these, if a TAB member has an interest in the particular meeting, you can still go as long as it's not more than 2 of us attending. But I was curious, Jen, in particular, I'm going to put you on the spot, wondering if you wanted to be involved with the Pedestrian Crossing Treatment Installation Guidelines Working Group. Darcy, of course, has done a lot of work with walking stuff around here, but we thought that you might have a perspective. And I don't recall what the kind of time commitment was looking like, but I think it's going to pick up pretty quickly and also wrap up pretty quickly, as I recall.
Yeah, in fact, we just had a meeting this past week. So I wanted to mention that I was there and Trini was also there.
Okay.
But I am happy to yield my space on that committee to Jen if she's interested. Yeah, so yeah, Trini and I were both on that meeting this past week with
how many meetings do you think they're going to have?
They said there was just going to be, in fact, I'm sorry, I wasn't prepared. I should have brought that up. I have it in my work email and I can't see it right now, but there was just like one other meeting this fall scheduled as far as I could tell. So one, and it was a substantial, it was like an hour-and-a-half meeting, and then there will be another one in September, I think. So, low demand, but important for upgrading the guidelines. So if Jen, that's something you'd like to be involved with, I'm happy to yield my space to you.
At this time, I cannot commit to that, so I
Okay.
appreciate you doing that.
Okay, thanks, appreciate that. Thanks, Darcy, for going. I do say with your, your prior experience, you're the right person for this one, so.
Yeah, and I was invited directly, so I just, it just made sense for me to go because I had been part of the pedestrian advisory committee and all these other things, and so it just kind of made sense for me to be there. But
Okay.
yeah, we can, looking forward, we can designate someone else if we like.
Sure. Mike, do you want to be the alternate for this? Since we don't really have you in the wings for anything in particular, or we could just push it back on Trini. If there's only one more meeting, she's already been to the first one. If she's not here, I can volunteer her.
No, I'd be happy to attend as well.
Okay. Well,
Um,
we'll put you down for alternate and see what happens with the timing for the next meeting.
Okay.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, all set, Meredith, on that? I can't hear you. I was just hoping for a thumbs up.
Meredith is muted.
There you go.
So sorry. Yeah, Charlie Brett, wah, wah, wah. Sorry. So Jen is primary and Mike is alternate, is that correct?
No, Darcy is primary.
Darcy is going to remain, thank you.
Yes, Darcy will remain.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's why I checked. Okay, let's quickly talk about the retreat. All of you were available in the, what did we say, 9 to 1 time frame?
10 to 2.
10 to 2, thank you. 10 to 2. And all of us preferred an in-person meeting. My understanding is we're still working on a meeting location, but I'm hopeful we will be able to pin one down and keep you posted. With asking for input about what the agenda might look like, and then also talking sort of with staff and with Natalie about timing and things. I think there's going to be 3 main things that we talk about, with some time for some getting to know you stuff and some breaks and some, I don't know, side conversations. We will be meeting approximately, I don't know, I would guess 45 minutes to an hour with someone from the city attorney's office. We'll be talking about communications, emails, and potentially policies and procedures, about how TAB operates. So sort of formalizing just the way that we operate and interact with staff. It's something that other boards do have, not all of them, and this board doesn't. And we'll talk about whether we want to, whether we need to. It's kind of reviving an effort that came up a couple years ago with prior TABs. I would like to include an item for about an hour, just kind of talking about communication efforts, specifically how we work, as TAB, go over a little bit, sort of talking to the press, I think. Sometimes we get called, to speak on our behalf and just things to be cautious of, but also I would like to have more robust discussion with staff about how we can sort of help city staff in the city communications office get their messaging across and kind of be more united if we want to be united. Also how to disagree with what we think is going on. But I would like to have about an hour discussion of that. And I think we'll probably also at the beginning of that, hope to get a little bit of insight from the city attorney's office if that hasn't already been discussed in our sort of general TAB communications and emails sort of item. And then Mike has raised an interest, and I think it's a good one to talk about sort of our budgeting and spending and kind of along the lines of what we were discussing before, just how to think about, the scope of what we are asked to weigh in on, the scope of things we shouldn't necessarily be weighing in on, how nitpicky we should or shouldn't be, and where we can be useful on helping sort of support staff in its longer term planning efforts and spending and budgeting efforts. And I'm not really sure how that's going to flesh out, Mike. I would like to talk to you a little bit more about that. But I'm hoping to get you a draft agenda at some point on Friday. We'll have a meeting with city staff in the morning. And we'll hopefully pin down a location and more of a an agenda. If there's something else that you would like to see on the retreat agenda, this is kind of your last call. Email me if you don't want to raise it right now. Call me, you know how to reach me, but I will be trying to finalize this on Friday, but that's what it looks like to me at the moment.
Just a-
Mike? Yeah.
Point of information, sounds like this is a public meeting, and what does that entail in terms of, is it being
It's one of the
broadcast?
ones where the public can watch, but there's no public input. So there's no public hearing, there's no public comment. I'm trying to remember, in the prior in-person meetings, did we ever have someone come in person? I think we probably did. But they just kind of watch.
And it will be broadcast on the internet? Or
That's a
before?
fine question. Let's just say when we did the in-person ones before, it wasn't.
Okay.
But COVID has happened and now Zoom is happening. And so I don't know. Probably, I mean, I would guess so. Is that right, Natalie? We don't know.
Yeah, so what I will try to do is when we're working on a location, we'll work on a location that we can
Okay.
that it can be, you know, a hybrid.
We have,
kind of
to be clear, we have always recorded it, Mike. So there's always been like an audio recording available, just like any other meeting. And so yes, that will be recorded, but whether it'll be kind of live time like this, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good question. Anything else on that? No fires to put out at the moment. Great. Open board comment. Anyone have anything they want to raise that we haven't already been cogitating about? I think I just have one thing if I'm not seeing any hands. And it's something that Natalie and I have talked about before, kind of on our walks around town, but it has really come up quite frequently. I think mostly from emails from Community Cycles and some, I think, well-placed ire about different construction areas. That oftentimes the construction, you know, there's materials that are stored in the public right of way. There's fencing that closes off a sidewalk. There's stuff that gets in the way. Signage alerting, you know, people to a work zone coming up, and that signage is plonk in the bike lane kind of thing. And it just feels like we don't understand, we members of the public trying to use our public right of way in different modes, don't understand why sometimes construction projects can take up the sidewalk for a week or longer, and really complicate things for these vulnerable users without any apparent forethought, oversight, an alternative being provided. And so I'm just wanting to, it may be for a future meeting, but I think it is something worth thinking about. I think, Natalie, when you and I were walking around, I'm like, now, why is this allowed? You said, okay, that's actually not allowed. And I will call, you know, the right-of-way management, something like that. And sure enough, the next day that, you know, that big piece of machinery was not blocking the sidewalk anymore, but it was 4 days later. It's just like, what happens when it's violated? And in particular, some of these are clearly when they're fenced off, the construction crew might not have done it properly. So there was the church on South Broadway that blocked off the sidewalk, and they shouldn't have, with their chain link fencing. So I would just like to have a little bit more clarity and discussion about what the rules are about preserving cyclist and pedestrian access, in particular in connection or in adjacent to construction zones, because it seems to be all over the place. But if it happened in the roadway, if it was taking up a motor vehicle lane the way that it takes up sidewalks and bike lanes, we would never sit for it. There, rant 3 of the evening. Sheesh, something's gotten into me. Anything else? Open board comment from anybody else? I gather Natalie doesn't want to respond to my rant, but that's okay.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure that I haven't answer to it tonight. You know, I think as we've discussed, like there are opportunities potentially with, you know, with development review as projects are in that period in which they're starting construction. I think, frankly, like it gets to staffing resource constraints. We have, you know, just a very limited team of people on our right-of-way team. And so I think it's probably not possible for us to kind of be babysitting every project that's happening. And so oftentimes it is that reactive, like what you described. But I think, you know, it's something that we certainly recognize is there's an opportunity there. I just don't know that we have like a solution that I can speak to tonight.
Sure.
And
Yeah, so we know
certainly
that
if others from the team, Garrett, Valerie, if you have anything you want to speak to, please.
there's conspicuous silence. That's okay.
Yeah, I can jump in here and just speak to what I understand of the challenge that Natalie is referencing. So I would say I'd like to think that we're pretty good on the capital projects in terms of not having these sudden surprises where the sidewalks suddenly close, that we provide detours or notification in advance. We're not perfect, but we try really, really hard where if we have to do a closure, that we provide advance notification to go to the other side of the street, either at a ped crossing or a traffic signal and so on and so forth. That same practice doesn't always occur on the private development projects. And on our capital improvement projects, we have the staffing and resources to make sure that those controls and those detour notifications are put in place. The average right-of-way inspector for private development has 30 to 40 different projects that they're inspecting at any given time. And so they're not able to sit on a project like we are on the capital projects, where we have staff devoted to just that one project and monitor it. So I don't know what the easy answer is, but I can tell you that there is a disparate level of staffing and resource that goes to the private development enforcement versus the capital enforcement.
I wonder if fines for not complying were worse if suddenly private developers might summon the resources to appropriately follow their responsibilities. I mean, I'm assuming in terms of the development review and those right-of-way permits, that there is a checklist that says what you do if you're blocking a bike lane or sidewalk. Is that a safe assumption, or am I Pollyannish again?
I'm not familiar enough with that side of our organization to be able to speak to it, so I don't want to conjecture.
Sure. All right. Well, I appreciate your response, and like I said, I would like to raise this, you know, in more depth in the future, because it does keep arising, and I think it does affect I think it affects the city's credibility about whether it's actually prioritizing the things that it says it's wanting to prioritize. And this is a really good place when we say we're making improvements and we're doing this for multimodal stuff, but in the meantime, I'm sorry, you're going to have to go, you know, go play in traffic, literally. So I think we can try to help you do better on that, help the city do better on that. Yes, Mike.
Yeah, I don't know who to address this to, but this is really about the CU project on Broadway with University and Grandview, where there seems to be an issue where the bike path and the pedestrian sidewalk have to cross over, and they've chosen that place to be at Grandview, which is on a downhill, which has been noted as a dangerous place for that to happen, and it would be better to have that happen up at University. Does the city have any say in this design that's happening right now?
Mike, are you asking about a detour?
No, this is the permanent.
He's talking about when they cross sides, when peds go from being next to the street to being on the other side.
Oh, yeah, as they pass the intersection. So, and I'm not sure where the construction is at right now. Garrett, feel free to jump in if you have, just more timely information on this. But we will push that further, past the intersection so that change isn't having to happen right as they get through the intersection. That's going to be addressed, and it will be, it'll basically just happen a little bit further. I don't know the exact number of feet that we ended up where we landed with CU, Garrett. But I don't know, has that condition been put in place yet, or is that to come?
It's still to come. And my understanding, according to the last update, was it was supposed to be late this year. I don't have regular updates from that project team, so I don't know if they're on schedule or if they're running behind. But the last I'd heard, it was supposed to be later this year.
Yeah, and that's something I'm happy to follow up on that, just to get a status update to understand when that will be addressed.
So you're saying that crossing will happen downhill further?
Yeah, it'll happen further downhill instead of further uphill.
Right. Because there was the recognition that having that occur basically right as, people get through the intersection is not great, because there's a lot going on. And so it will just be further down where that will take place.
So I don't think there was some thought that pushing it up to University might be better because it's not downhill. But you're saying that the intersection complicates that?
Yeah. So through the design process, it was recommended that the current configuration with the bikes on the bikes are on the east side, right? They're traveling on the east side. That intersection, that was the recommended design. But then there was the recognition that once you get to Grandview and get through Grandview, they were, as it's shown today, they have to immediately, bikes have to then be on the outside lane. And we're trying to address that so that they continue on the inside lane further down the hill, so that conflict just isn't happening at the intersection, basically, or that decision isn't happening at the intersection.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, obviously when you get down to the Arboretum, the bike lane takes off to
it
the
does. Yeah.
So
we're trying to meet that condition.
the issue, I'm wondering why is, it looks like previously the bike lane was on the east side this whole way. But now it's moving back.
Mike, I'm going to suggest that we take this conversation sort of out of the tab meeting. We don't really need to all of staff and members of the public to come through this. But I'm sure we can find, if it might be better just for an email exchange. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm happy to, and Mike, we can talk too. I'm happy to connect with you and we can talk through. We've had a lot of conversations.
There's been a lot of talk about this.
So I'm happy to reach out to you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Any other open board comment for now? Lovely. Future agenda topics. If anyone has anything to raise now or by next, well, we can talk about it at the retreat too. So, but as I said, I'm here. You know how to find me. You know how to email me, and I'll even, if I see it's you, I'll even answer my phone. That's special tab treatment. So let me know if you have any ideas for future agenda topics. But otherwise, I will be happy to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
1 minute early, Darcy Kitching. Have a second?
A second.
Thank you. All good? All right, if we move to adjourn, Jen, if I can't see you, we gotta vote you anyway. So thank you. We're adjourned. Have a good night. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate
See you
it.
next
Thanks, Kara.
Monday.
Thanks, Natalie.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.